I am so excited to bring you today's episode because it's our first interview. When I started planning Courtside Forever, I knew I wanted to do a mix of solo podcast episodes and certainly some interviews. As a writer, the solo episodes are fun because I get to take pieces that I want to write about and turn them into an episode. But professionally, I've actually been an interviewer for just about 2 decades, even training executives and managers on how to lead better conversations. I love conducting interviews. I'm curious by nature, so you can put me in the room with just about anyone and I'm going to ask questions to get to know what makes them tick. I believe everyone has a story to tell, and my goal is to share other people's stories with our Courtside community. Now today, I am thrilled to interview Mike Rogge, owner and editor of Mountain Gazette. Mountain Gazette is one of the largest print magazines in the country today with a rich history that goes back decades. A few years ago, Mike actually purchased the publication that had laid dormant for almost a decade. And what Mike's done with the magazine is a story that is absolutely made for how I built this. Mike is a husband and a father of 2 wonderful boys. And while he and his family live in Tahoe, he actually grew up in a small town in upstate New York, right up the street from me. That's right. Mike is actually one of my oldest friends. Our families go way, way, way back, and Mike and I actually attended our first concert together. We talk about this a little bit on the podcast, but I wanted you to take a guess on who we saw. And whoever you're thinking we saw, I almost guarantee that you're wrong. I've watched Mike build his business from the ground up, and to me, one of the coolest things is the man stays true to his people, and that's his family and his readers. A truly amazing testament to fatherhood and purpose. So thanks for being here for this episode of Courtside Forever, because as parents, we've got the best seats in the house. Let's enjoy them. All right, Mike Rogge, owner of Mountain Gazette, and probably most importantly, one of my longest childhood friends. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. I'm so honored to be the first guest on your podcast. This is great.
I know, first guest. I'm thrilled. When I started putting this together, I started thinking of who would I want to reach out to? And you were obviously on the top of the list in terms of not only somebody who I've had so many conversations with for 3 decades now, almost 3 decades.
Jeez, yeah.
But, just somebody who is building something really incredible. And I know there's a lot of parents out there, a lot of dads who, whatever it is, are really looking to build something great. So I've learned a ton from you over the years, just through texts and conversations and hangouts at the zoo and at baseball games. So I was thrilled to have you on to just talk about family, Mountain Gazette, and the future of it. So there's all that. But first things first, how are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great, man. It's sunny here in Lake Tahoe. And I'm in the Mountain Gazette office. My kids are at school, so I've got a little bit of time to hop on with an old buddy and, talk about 6th grade intramural basketball, if that's where it needs to go. So.
I think I'm just going to pull a curveball, and we're just going to talk all about Queensbury Middle School. For our guest who might not know, Mike and I have a ton of similarities. Both of us obviously living in Northern California. Obviously, you're in Lake Tahoe. I'm in Vacaville, so a little far away, but we're still in Northern California. But we grew up in Queensbury, New York, right outside the Adirondacks. And the thing is, for as long as I've known you, your name and you have been synonymous with skiing, for sure. So if you can recall, what are some of your earliest memories of skiing back in Queensbury in upstate New York?
Yeah, so I grew up about a 5 to 6 minute drive from West Mountain. I actually think you were probably a little closer where you and your mom used to live. A little bit closer.
Yeah, I was like 2 minutes away.
Yeah, and so what was nice was that to me, the early memories of skiing are all about my family, about my dad, trying to convince me to cram my feet into cold plastic boots that were not mine. They were rentals, and we certainly, did not come from a ton of money. We were not going to Aspen or Tahoe or any of even Vermont at that point. But West Mountain had a $10 night and you could go, and that included your rentals, and you could get all of your gear, and you could try it. And I think that those are my earliest memories of skiing, is skiing at night, skiing under the lights at West Mountain.
I love it. I love it. West Mountain was obviously one that I was familiar with. What were some of the other, resorts? I don't know, or what were some of the other locations that you were skiing at back then?
So for a long time, I would say like the first like 10 years I skied, it was only West Mountain. It was primarily at night and maybe on like Sunday mornings if it wasn't too crowded. And then we'd go to Gore Mountain once a year. That became like our first like destination. I remember the first trip to Whiteface, which is further up in the Adirondacks, host of the 1932 and 1980 Olympics, probably knows most notably the 1980 Miracle on Ice, where the U.S. beat the Russians. But yeah, we used to go up to Whiteface, and then when I turned 16 and I got my driver's license, I started driving over to Vermont, and that was sort of how I got into, which is the wider ski culture that I'm a part of now. I started meeting kids from all over the Northeast that were into the same style of skiing that I was into. We were communicating on message boards online. This is way before Facebook. This is way before Instagram. So we were just, we had our own sites. We had newschoolers.com. And we, that became the tool to go see other places. Like you'd hear from kids that would ski in southern Vermont at, say, Okemo or Mount Snow, and they'd be communicating like, oh, the terrain park crew built these crazy cool features, and like, here's a photo of them, and we'd see them and be like, we should go there this weekend. And from that quickly became a habit that was really expensive that I couldn't afford. And so pretty naturally I started writing about skiing because I learned you could get free lift tickets if you wrote about the resorts. And that started when I was 17. And I turned 39 next week, so this is something that I've been doing professionally for over 20 years, which is kind of wild.
I love it. And like I mentioned, I mean, like even when we were in middle school, I mean, like skiing was always your thing. I wasn't a skier, like you mentioned. It's not the cheapest sport in the world to get into. So no. I used to just take my sled and just find any mountain, typically in my neighborhood, and just kind of sled down. But like skiing, you have always been, I vividly remember you in middle school talking about skiing, really advocating for skiing. I also remember when snowboarding became like really big, and I have this memory of you just like being such an advocate for skiing, even as people were switching over to snowboarding. And Mike was always like, no, like skiing is the thing.
I never thought it was much of a rivalry so much as like it was just my thing, I liked it. And it was my thing. It's like, baseball has waned in popularity and to lacrosse and a lot of like youth sports. And so I meet a lot of kids here in Tahoe that still love baseball, and they ask if they should play lacrosse, and I'm like, no. If you like baseball, like play baseball. Like I like skiing. I didn't have anything against snowboarding as it gained in popularity. I just really enjoyed going downhill, facing forward. And then on the cost prohibitive thing, I do think one of the cool parts about where we grew up is it's very industrious. There's a lot of blue collar workers. And what that means is there's a lot of like PVC piping, which is what you use to like pipe out like drainage and whatnot in your house. And we used to take old PVC pipes and like put them in backyards. Travis Camp, a snowboarder that you probably remember, we used to put it in his backyard and would just hike when we couldn't afford a lift ticket. And so we were just at a place where it was like, once you had the equipment, which I'd say it's around the same cost of like playing hockey or maybe buying your own equipment in football or something like that. We would just do it wherever we could. And that's how I got into street skiing. That's how I started covering the early days of people hitting handrails and sliding on walls and skiing in streets. And what I didn't realize at the time was that was the dawn of something that was much bigger than what was happening in Queensbury. It was happening globally, and I was riding this wave that I didn't even know I was on. I just thought I was having fun with my friends.
I love it. Now, you have always been really true to your roots. Obviously, you talk about Queensbury a ton. You talk about family a ton. And I've obviously been really fortunate to get to know your parents and your sister and spend a lot of time with your family. So I know how much they mean to you. But how did family foster your love for skiing and your eventual path towards writing?
So I would say, and you and I have talked about fatherhood quite a bit. It's something that we're both like. I think you're more vocal about it publicly than I am, but I think that I would argue that we're equally passionate about just showing up in ways that our dads didn't. Yours is very specifically different than my experience, but I was born into a socioeconomic status that could be seen as like pretty lower class. I was brought home to a mobile home park, single wide mobile home. My parents are high school educated, and my dad worked really hard. I'd say that the thing that people say about my parents is that they're very nice people, and my dad works very hard. That's like kind of what everyone locally knows about my dad. And so I think my love of skiing, in a way, when I look back at it, is that was the time that I got to my dad. I got with my dad all to myself. Like he was working 50, 60, sometimes literally 70 hours a week, building up his business, trying to, grow our status in the world. And I don't mean like from like a reputation or anything like that. I will say, like, as my parents have like, brought themselves up economically, like they're still the same people. They shop at the same places and like they enjoy the same things. We still go to the balloon festival early in the fall. But for me, like skiing, like I said, it was a spot where I got to just be with my dad. And then on the writing side, I am the product of both of my parents for sure. I think I get my work ethic from my dad, but I get my creativity from my mom. My mom was a pretty brilliant painter in high school, and she's always been a insane reader. The books were always in our house. Magazines were always in our house. They were always we were never not allowed to read anything. And so it was there, and it was what I saw. I was exposed to it, of like, mom has a few minutes to herself. What's she doing? She's on the back porch with a cup of coffee reading a magazine. And that was just what I saw. And I'm like, oh, cool. And again, I think when you're kids, you look at what, I think that you look at what keeps your parents' attention, and then maybe you try to mimic that in a way.
I love that.
Yeah. Now, so I think that's why I love skiing and writing. Yeah.
I love that. As somebody who's spent a lot of time at your home, certainly as a kid, I remember seeing that feeling. It felt just like a safe home, like where your parents were always attentive. Your mom was very in tune to what's going on. Certainly, maybe less so when you and I went to the Puff Daddy concert back in 97,
wow.
98.
That maybe has aged so poorly. That poorly. Story, like, I'd like to condemn Sean Combs for all of his heinous acts, and also the fact that was a really great story for us for 30 years that he is just sort of like totally torched. I will say we did see a young artist open up for him named Jay-Z, so we still have that.
We did. It's
now.
One of my favorite icebreakers when people say like, oh, what was your favorite concert? Or who was the first person you saw perform live? And I get to say, oh, Jay-Z. He was the opening act for Diddy. Now, I will say, I think our parents were very much on the I don't like Diddy train, like way before it was cool. So, I think after everything went down with him, my mom texted me. She was like, did you see what happened
told
to Diddy?
You so.
I was like,
yes, our mom's got the ultimate 30-year-long told you so. Good job.
They did. They've been on that train for a long time. But no, your parents have always been great, and I love your background. I love the story. In terms of how you've gone from where we came from in Queensbury to where you are now, and obviously there's been 20 plus years of work in between that. So you've worked for a number of publications throughout your career, and you've seen journalism really evolve to be a lot more digitally focused. Yet in 2020, you decided to purchase Mountain Gazette, which is a print magazine that originated in 1966 and since then has lived a number of different lives. So I have two questions for you about that. Number one, what was it about Mountain Gazette that made you want to revive it? And second, would you be able to share what actually went into purchasing the magazine itself?
Sure. So I guess part one is that all of the publications I worked for had very core audiences, core messages, and I found that rather than focusing on telling those great stories to our audience, we were focused on doing 15 other things so that we could afford to do the thing we were supposed to do. And it always, like, Don, it's like it's like a game of mousetrap almost, where it's like, imagine if you had to jump through 15 hoops just to go get an ice cream cone. You know, you're just like, oh yeah, I have to do X, Y, blah, blah. Like, a lot of people would kind of not enjoy the getting ice cream. You know what I mean? And it sounds silly, but like, people, when I worked at Powder, like, people wanted deep powder skiing stories from us. They wanted adventure stories. And I think the idea, we lost the message for sure. And I put this on myself too. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I knew back then. I didn't know. I was just happy to be there. Yeah. You know, working for Powder Magazine is equivalent for a comedian making SNL. You know, in my world, like, that to me was the pinnacle. I was working for the number one franchise, I thought, in all of action sports, and we had to do all the social media stuff and email stuff and whatever. And I tried to find enjoyment in all of it, but like, we just never were able to really get to the core of what we wanted to do, which was putting out great magazines. That was Powder Magazine. That's what people wanted. So with Mountain Gazette, a contributor of ours at Mountain Gazette now, who's the last editor of the Gazette in 2012, one of the last editors, he kind of told me about the lore of like, look, it's alternative, it's off the beaten path, it's not cut and dry, it's very eclectic, you sort of never know what you're going to get in each issue. And I liked the element of surprise. I loved that the 70s edition was like so focused on like photography when it was just black and white photography, but still they felt that was important. And I knew that it had a legend and a lore, and what I wanted to do and bring it back was, I feel like my generation of writers, you know, like I said, I'm 38, I turned 39 soon, and my generation had some publications that would do that at the beginning of our career. We never really got the chance to like grow up and become writers and, you know, and enter this pantheon of John Krakauers and like the amazing outdoor writers that like Hunter S. Thompson, like these crazy journalists and writers that have come before us. And so what I wanted the Gazette to do was to have a history that people want to be a part of. You know, Galen Rowell, like, shot photo, like, he's the adventure photographer, like, creator, you know? So, like...
Well, I saw Steve Martin was also a contributor, or maybe...
Steve Martin's a contributor now,
That is amazing.
Yeah, we exchange emails occasionally, like, a few times a year, and he's... From our exchanges, he's a very, like, meticulous... funny, I mean, obviously funny person, but like saying Steve Martin's funny is like saying like the Rolling Stones are a good band. It's like,
which is funny because early on in his career it wasn't that way. I know he really struggled like in the 70s to really find his voice, and recently I feel like I heard that somebody pushed him into writing, which I found was so interesting that now he is a contributor for Mountain Gazette.
Yeah, so he works with Harry Bliss, who did our most recent cover. And they are a creative duo, and he does cartoons that just make him laugh. They write quick little cartoons. It's funny. It's good joke writing. And yeah, I love working with him. It's very interesting. I never in a million years thought my world would revolve around the shooting of the next season of Only Murders in the Building, but it does. And Harry and I are waiting for Steve to get offset so that we can start coming up with ideas for the spring issue next year, and so it's pretty wild. But as getting back to your second question, which was how did I buy it? I bought it like it was something on Craigslist, Ryan. I knew it was for sale. I found out who owned it. I reached out to him via email. We got to a price. We kept going back and forth on the price. I could tell he wanted to sell it. I'm a big believer that in those negotiations, you have to know how much you can afford, not how badly you want it. Because if how badly you want it overtakes what you can afford, you're going to pay too much and it's going to fail. And so I went in, I was honest the whole time about what my intentions were, what I wanted to do, my dream for it. So he knew why I wanted it, but I also was very clear. This is all I can afford, and the reason why I can only afford this is because I have to do this on my own. I have to bootstrap it. I have to build it myself. I don't want to take money from friends, family, venture capital, banks. I want to take my own savings, invest in this, and grow it at the pace it's supposed to grow at. And there's not there was a world in which maybe Mountain Gazette didn't work out, and I had thousands of dollars worth of magazines sitting in my garage, to the dismay of my lovely wife, who'd be pretty upset with me. And I'm just this weird magazine hoarder, who owns I own a dead magazine, and people are like, cool. It's like owning a dead cat. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Jeez. Now, through that, obviously, here we are 4.5 years after you purchased Mountain Gazette. And as somebody who's been a subscriber since, I think, issue 194, was that the first one that
You've been an original subscriber of the revival. That's right.
I have been. I'm a big fan of it. And what I love about it is, like, when you think of journalism today and like publications today, a lot of it is clickbait or SEO focused, like listicles and things like that. And Mountain Gazette is authentic, it is raw, and honestly, like, it is absolutely beautiful. Just in terms of the writing, in terms of every single part, like the size of the magazine, everything is beautiful. So, in short, how did you find Mountain Gazette's voice?
Well, it's funny because I think it's evolved over the last 4.5 years. I think my first 7 issues, I guess 7 issues, all the way up to Mountain Gazette 200, was trying to remind people of the voice of the magazine. So I have this whole archive, right? It's behind me. I showed you before we started the call. I read through it during the pandemic. We were at home, I had time, and I found the voice. And I found that, like, it had been crass, it had been angry, it had been funny, introspective, informative, never boring. That was it. It was never boring. It always had, everyone had something to say. There was never the idea of we should do this because we should do this. It was always like, no, this person has something to say. And so what I took away from it was always representative of the voice of the culture. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is very powerful. Because if you have the voice of the culture in your pages, the culture is certainly going to change, and you're going to change with it. And it won't be something that I necessarily have to... I certainly have to curate those voices, but I don't have to know what's happening in the culture every day. And let's be honest, like, I'm a 38-year-old father of 2. Like, I'm not going to know what's trending, what's culturally relevant. But at the same time, my writers do, and my photographers do, and my artists do. And therefore, each issue of the magazine is totally different than the last. And I now feel like with issue 202, my friend Peter yesterday said, this is my acoustic album. This is the one where it's like 200 and 201 were very loud. Like, here we are, we're here. We've 3.5x'd our subscriber base in 10 months. Like, we're not a small magazine anymore. We are like a mid-sized North American magazine. We are one of the largest independent magazines in the whole world. Yeah. And not just in size, in our subscriber base. But now it's like, okay, now I want this voice not to be looking backward. I'd like it to be looking forward. And I'd like us to tell stories. Like, I can tell you right now, the number of pitches I've gotten from North Carolina since the hurricane hit have been unbelievable. And it's not we need help. It's not that. It's that we're going to rebuild, and you should help us tell the story of what we're going to do here. Yeah. So, it's really cool.
You're heading that way, and one of the things I found really interesting, just my Mountain Gazette in general, is, so for example, this summer you told Alta Journal that you have no plans to increase the publication's frequency or pursue scale for scale's sake. Obviously, you touched on some of that right now. You also told Fast Company that you turned down an ad package for Mountain Gazette that would have boosted ad revenue in 2024 by 20 to 25% per issue. Now, I know you, so none of this surprises me, but I'm sure that, like, there's a lot of people who are very business focused who would hear these decisions and say, are you kidding me? Like, how? Why? Like, they are thriving. Why would he turn this down? So when it comes to Mountain Gazette, what is it that you value most?
Our readers.
What do you mean by
the relationship we have with them. The fact that if we're telling a joke, most people won't get it, but our readers will get it because they're in on the joke. And if we are being self-referential to an issue we've done, like, we will reference it in a way that our readers will get. And some people think that's exclusive. I don't think it's exclusive at all. I think it's inclusive. And what I mean is that when I started the magazine, our editorial mission had to be, what happens when you walk out your front door? Now, I'm going to go back to your sledding story, right? So here's the thing. We grew up in the same area, different family dynamics, different outdoor pursuits. But at the same time, you and I experienced the same climate, the same weather patterns, the same rituals, but they were just a little different. Now, historically, Ryan, people would say, especially if you don't mind me saying, because you're a man of color, people would say, oh, Ryan is not an outdoors person. We should bring Ryan over to skiing so that he can be an outdoors person. In my opinion, because I know you so well and we've gone sledding together, like, you love the outdoors, you love snow just as much as I do, just in a different way. And I think that's the part that separates us from other people, is that we've never tried to pander to any one group. We've always said, if you like walking out your front door and taking a deep breath, you can be one of our readers.
I love that.
If you like being inside and ripping on Nintendo Switch, like, we might not be your jam, and that's okay. But, like, I think that part of what has made our readership so strong is that we don't tell you who's allowed to be in the club. We're just like, if you like being outside and you're willing to pay full price for the magazine, and here's why we say full price. We don't discount the magazine. What you pay for the magazine is the same thing the best pro skier in the world pays for the magazine, Ryan. Like, and you and I are friends, so, like, I could throw you a deal. My mom and I pay the same price for the magazine. I actually have a subscription to my own magazine. I pay the full price. We've never discounted. We've never increased. Like, everyone is on equal footing. Yeah. And then the other thing is, once you've bought the magazine, we're pretty much done selling it. Like, we don't have we have some merch if you want to buy it, but, like, you know, you pay, you get 2 issues a year, and we're going to deliver things that are really good for you. And as far as turning down advertising, I felt that particular advertiser wasn't a good fit for our readers. I felt like the product they were selling, it wasn't tobacco or alcohol or anything like harmful like that. I just felt like it's selling something that they're not actually offering. I think their product isn't as good as what they're selling. And so I felt like that didn't fit. All the brands that come in, like, we vet them. You know, it's not hard to let Jackson Hole come in. Like, if you bring your family to Jackson Hole, it's going to be pretty fun. If you bring your family to Sundance or Alta or Snowbird or, like, any of our ski resort partners, if you buy a Solomon product, Rihanna wears Solomon products. How bad could they be? You know, I think that's it. And the one thing that people can't buy but you can sell in publishing is integrity. And you can sell out your integrity again and again and again and again, and then people ask themselves, why don't people trust the media? It's like, well, that's why. It's because people are smart and they can see through BS, you know? So I'm very happy with our size right now. I'm very happy that I have I have a level of privacy at home that's, like, really cool. At the same time, like, when I'm out, it's been crazy this last year. People recognize me, and that's been pretty interesting and cool. People pitch me stories when I'm waiting in line to get bagels with my 2-year-old. And I'm not like, no, it's not appropriate. Like, I listen to people. I think that's what comes with this. Is it shows that people care about it and they want to keep making it better. When people stop wanting to make Mountain Gazette better, we're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So
I remember, I think in 2014, you had invited me to San Francisco for a movie premiere of, I think it was a doc that you were working on. Forgive me, I forget the name because I certainly didn't mean to bring this up right now. But I remember Vice. Waiting in. Yes, with Vice. I remember it was with Vice because you introduced me to somebody at Vice. But I remember being in line. And, you know, I was by myself. I was waiting for my wife, Allie, to come. And I was just, you know, kind of chopping it up with some folks. And I was talking to this person for about 20 minutes. And, you know, they weren't like super interested in me, which is totally fine. And then at one point they did ask like, oh, so like, why are you here? I think I mentioned like, I'm not a skier, I'm not a snowboarder. So they were probably like, why, who is this person? Why is he even here at this event? I mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, Mike Rogge is actually one of my really good friends. And the person looked at me, he was like, you know Mike Rogge? And I was like,
That's so weird
I do.
to me.
I do.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah,
Isn't
this
it
was
weird
10
just
years
because
ago.
we've been friends for a long time? I mean, like, I gotta be honest, like, I don't think about that stuff a lot, but I will say, like, it feels nice. It's nice to be known for your work.
Oh, for
it's better
sure.
to be that than infamous. You know?
Yes,
I mean,
yes. And you hit it head on. Like, they know you for your work. And this is why, even though I've known you for decades and, going into this conversation, of course, I wanted to have my information. So just rereading Alta Journal, rereading the New York Times, rereading some of the other publications that have interviewed you. I feel so much pride in terms of just really seeing where Mountain Gazette is today, because I've seen the work that you've put in for decades. And I'm sure there are people that look at, I bought the publication in 2020 and within 4 years he's grown it, and, lucky him. But I have seen that work for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I know I've told you, and I'll say it right now, I'm just so proud of everything that you are currently doing.
Thanks, man.
So love to see it.
Thank you. I mean, I
course.
think the other thing is you probably know my work ethic primarily from the fact that we won a talent show together, lip syncing "Mo Money, No Problems" by the Notorious B.I.G. with 5 backup dancers, one of whom is a public art teacher in Brooklyn, and and I will say that it's. When John Branch, who interviewed me for the New York Times piece, like, he's a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner, and he said something great to me. We had a really frank conversation after the interview, and I said, John, what did it do for your life when you won a Pulitzer Prize? And he goes, when I look back, he goes, it's how people who don't know me will talk about me. And so I think about that a lot too, is that I, more than anything in the last 4.5 years, I've really understood the value of old, lasting friendships, how rare they are, how our friendship, how friends with some of our other friends from elementary school and middle school and high school are like everlasting, even if they're not as strong as they once were, like they're just still there. And I like that, like, me, Ryan, not just for all of my success, but also like my failings, my personal failings, like things we've talked about with, like, we've talked about family and struggles and all this other stuff. And it's like, I'm very honored that people appreciate the work we do, like we do at Mountain Gazette. It's not just me. I'm not a one-man show. But also, like, I think that's fleeting. I think there will obviously come a day where I don't run Mountain Gazette. I can't do this forever, because I won't live forever. I won't be here forever. But I think what I'm trying to do now, more than anything, is invest as much time into my relationships with my friends as I am into the magazine, because the magazine's grown quite a bit, and I think I've grown quite a bit, and I want to make sure that, like, I understand what's important. The readership is certainly important, and my friendships are certainly important too.
I love it. Well, honored to be a part of that circle. And like with your parents and sister, I've been fortunate enough to know your wife, Megan, who is also the VP of Mountain Gazette,
That's right.
and hang out with your kids. And you've got such an amazing family.
Thank you.
And I love them so much. And, so in terms of fatherhood, looking at Mountain Gazette, looking at fatherhood, how would you say fatherhood has shaped your views on building a business like Mountain Gazette?
I think when I work with people, because of my kids, I'm a lot more empathetic to their situation. Yeah. And it doesn't mean I like excuses. You know that too, as a dad. Like, excuses are pretty easy to come up with, but I think situational circumstances are a part of every person's life, whether you're a kid or an adult or a senior. And so I think the other thing too is that in my 20s, it was totally all about me. It was all about me. I'm tired. I'm hungover. I need to surf. I need to ski. It was all about me. And what I think is really helpful is the second you have a kid, if you're even a halfway, you can actually be a bad father, but if you're a present father, you're basically doing okay. Like, it is not about you anymore. You find that out seconds after you see a baby born. You're like, oh boy. I need to figure out. I mean, like, I certainly take care of myself and figure out the right things to eat and how to find sleep. And just this week, our 2-year-old started sleeping till 7, and it feels like there's nothing I want for my birthday, for Christmas, for the business, for anything, any personal gain I could ever get that's as valuable as a 2-year-old sleeping until 7 a.m. It is amazing. And I'm just like, dude, great. And so I think I also like being a dad shows me really what's important. And I think I'm getting a lot better at passing off really cool opportunities to other people and understanding the value of that, because I learned that as a dad. Christmas and birthday parties aren't about me, they're about my kids. Holidays aren't about me, they're about my kids, or about my parents and my kids, or my kids and their friends. And so I think we're recording this the week before our fall issue is supposed to come out. And I just saw a release video that'll come out. And I'm really excited for the video to come out, not for us, but for the people who made it. Yeah. Because I know they have kids. And for the people who made the issue with me, because they haven't seen it. And I know they're going to be just as surprised as I was when I first looked at it, the rough cut. So I do think there's this, I'm a little more community minded. I'm not so centrally focused on me. And my kids gave me that, which was so cool.
I love that. Your kids have given you so much, and you've done incredible with your family and with Mountain Gazette, of course. And honestly, it's a joy to watch it all grow. So now, before we get out of here, I do have one really important question for you. And that is something I want to ask all my guests going forward. So, to you, who would you say is the best fictional dad in entertainment? Now, this could be TV, it could be a book, it could be a movie, you name it. Who would you say is the best fictional dad to you?
Okay. I've got 3 answers that popped in my head immediately, and I'm trying to sort them out, so I'm not giving you 3 people. I'd like to answer your question correctly with 1 person.
Sounds good. I'm good with 3, but feel free. I mean, if you want to answer the question.
Okay. I'll share 3, and then I'll go. So, in no particular order, 1, Steve Martin in both Father of the Bride movies. It does still shock me that I get to work with the actor that played George Banks. In Father of the Bride. I'm a huge fan of those 90s rom-coms and anything that she didn't write this, but anything Nora Ephron made. I think Nora Ephron might be one of the best writers from Esquire era. So I don't know, some of those dads from those movies, but Steve Martin in that. John Candy in the movie The Great Outdoors, because I fully get the idea of trying to get your kids out of, even though we live in Tahoe, just trying to, in such poor form, get your kids to love the outdoors the way you do. Your kids will like the outdoors the way they will like the outdoors, and sure. I like that. Yeah. And then, Jack from This Is Us, probably. I'm going as hard as I can. He's probably the GOAT, right? But also, I think he has an unfair advantage, because when you die young, if you're cast in Amber, he had no chance to grow up and become a horrible voter and a weird Facebook dad or any of that stuff. He died in a fire in the 80s saving a dog. It's he's always going to be a great dad, but
he will be.
I do find myself sometimes echoing some of the dads from popular entertainment. I think from a book, The River McLean from A River Runs Through It by Norm MacLean is pretty good. especially because he was a father of two boys that were very different. I can relate to that quite a bit.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I don't know. It's just like in business. Like I look at other entrepreneurs and I respect all their good qualities and I'm always curious about their faults. But I do know that being a good father is being there, is being present. You know what I mean? It's like being and following your kids. Like I know you're coaching girls basketball right now, and like you take it to the nth degree of getting like Sabrina kicks and like and like, you know what I mean, of just like being all in. And like that's how I feel is like, you know, my eldest son's really into soccer and I never played soccer, but like we have the MLS package on Apple TV and I'm always like, hey, look, Messi's playing, we should check this out. And I'm just like trying to help grow his love of what he's found in his life that he really enjoys. And I think that's being a good dad, too, is not getting your kids to love what you love. My kids like the New York Mets. They do not love the New York Mets. But that's like, you know.
Understandable.
I'm sure you have a similar thing raising Indiana Pacers fans in Warriors country. You know,
I do. Yeah, my youngest is already like, kind of like, oh, go Warriors, this and that. And I'm having such a tough time because again, I grew up in New York and my family, they were all Knicks fans, and I became a diehard Indiana Pacers fan.
Talk about good dads, though. I mean, Steph Curry, LeBron James. Oh, those guys are gold standard dads. You know what I mean?
I love it, and I just started watching the Starting Five documentary last night on Netflix, and just to see, first of all, Domantas Sabonis, former Pacer, I love the guy, but to see him as a dad, see Jimmy Butler as a dad, LeBron obviously playing with his own son.
Yeah.
Steph Curry's not in the doc, but watching him in fatherhood, you know, it's just, you know, it's amazing to see. So I love the representation of dads.
But I want to say I'm grateful to be on this podcast because I think the idea of, and we've talked about this, normalizing emotionally complicated people as fathers, I think is a good thing, and not being the 1950s dad that comes home waiting for his wife to serve him a cocktail and then he reads the newspaper away from his kids. I think like every generation of parenting is, I believe, to be equally as hard, presenting its own challenges, but I think this one in particular is really hard because it's become politically risky for whatever reason to show vulnerability as a man, and it's become like, but yeah, I mean, dude, I love being a dad. I would never apologize for being a dad, and I would never admit to being a perfect father because it just don't exist. But I think it's good to have a podcast out there talking about being a dad, because I like being a dad. It's my favorite thing that I am.
I love it. So. Well, Mike, you will forever be the first guest on Courtside Forever, and for so many reasons, I'm incredibly grateful to you. So, where can the people find you?
You can find me in the pages of Mountain Gazette. That is where I like to spend a lot of my time. So I write the intro every single issue, and that's it. We're at mountaingazette.com.
I love it. Well, Mike, always a pleasure, whether it's over recording or my favorite, in person. I owe you a visit to Tahoe, so I'm saying this out loud. By the end of this year, I'm making that happen.
Great. Come on up. I can't wait to have you.
On. Mike Rogge, Mountain Gazette, everybody. A very special thank you to Mike for being my first guest on Courtside Forever. Head to mountaingazette.com to become a subscriber. Listen, I'm telling you, this magazine is beautiful. And thanks to you for tuning in to Courtside Forever, where our goal is to ensure that parents enjoy the best seats in the house. If you enjoyed this episode, share with a friend or two, and feel free to reach out with any comments or questions. I'm your host, Ryan Rucker, and I appreciate you being here. Take care.